Spamton, everyone's favourite #1 rated salesman 1997. And Alastor, the radio demon and the anomaly of hell. The devil's in the details of many deals around the world. And not only does that go for these guys' deals, but also their tragic pasts. I'm your host Sprite, and it's my job to analyse their origins, stories, and feats to find out who would win a Sprite fight. For millennia, the worlds of light and dark lived in complete balance and harmony. However, if this harmony was ever to shatter, it would cause a calamity, forcing the earth into chaos and causing her to draw her final breath. Only then will three heroes appear at the world's edge: a human, a monster, and a prince of the dark. Only will they have the ability to seal up the dark fountains seeping into the light world and save the earth. This is the tale of Deltarune. These three heroes went by the name Chris the human, Susie the monster, and Rousey the fluffy prince. In order to seal these dark fountains, these three had to go through multiple strange and wacky places and meet equally strange and wacky characters, one of which being our focus today. During their time in the dark world known as the Cyber City, they would commonly encounter this race known as the Addisons, these salesman-like beings. And when Chris was going down an alleyway, they met one of these Addisons. But this one was different. Introducing Spamton G. Spamton. Spamton was different compared to your average Addison. He was shorter, stranger, and his light world form was odd. See, in the dark world, everyday objects like playing cards or computers can manifest into full-on entities. These entities in the dark worlds that they reside in are created via lighteners, such as you or me. The lightener will channel their will into a blade and stab the ground, creating a dark fountain and allowing access to a dark world. And Spamton is the manifestation of spam emails. As a Darkner, Spamton possesses a few unique abilities. He can shoot physical words from his mouth, manipulate the space around him and remove objects from said space, create clones, and even attack, manipulate or destroy your very soul, potentially even bypassing your physical durability. Although this is debatable considering the durability of one's soul is buffed by the likes of physical armor. But it's up in the air. And being a Darkner, Spamton doesn't actually have a soul himself. Despite his uniqueness, Spamton was overlooked and could never catch a break. But he vowed to his fellow Addisons that one day he would make it into the big leagues, that he would one day become a big shot. What defined Spamton was his sheer perseverance, his ability to keep pushing no matter what, and his perseverance would eventually pay off. One day, he got a mysterious call on his phone from an unknown number, and after a simple talk, all his dreams came true. He was massively successful, and he was finally becoming the big shot he always wanted to be. His fellow Addisons began getting jealous and stopped talking to him, but he didn't care. He was on the phone all the time with this unknown caller. Spamton even managed to get a room inside of Queen, the ruler of the Cyber City's manor, and a massive partnership with the legend himself, Tenor. Things seemed to finally be going his way, until one day. When he tried spilling the beans to Tenor about his success, he had to take a phone call, and it was from this mysterious entity, and Spamton went pale before running out of the room before Tenor could stop him. Spamton's relationship with them started getting iffy. Just like that, Spamton's stocks plummeted. His fame had gone. He'd severed ties with Tenor, and he lost everything. Kicked out of Queen's Manor after leaving the unknown caller on bad terms, and forced to live in a dumpster. Spamton had hit rock bottom once again, but his perseverance never ceased, and he found a light at the end of the tunnel. When he finally ran into Chris, Spamton had the perfect idea. See, during his time in the manor, Spamton had happened upon a strange artifact that he consistently worshipped, believing it to be his next big break. A strange suit of armor locked down in the basement. He tried to make attempts to get it after being kicked out, but to no avail. But now, he had someone who could get it for him. Spamton on his own is powerful enough, but this suit could make him even stronger, and that's really saying something. Spamton, even in base form, is capable of keeping up with Chris, whose soul was fast enough to move in tandem with light, and even dodge the Zapper's lasers. These are definitely lasers from the properties listed on screen. This would require moving at over 70% the speed of light. You could also argue that Chris is capable of creating dark fountains, as we see in the end of Chapter 2, and that would mean that they would be comparing with the power needed to create cities, moon-like baseballs, and possibly even stars. That's not exactly valid, however, considering the problem there is that the dark fountains are more so illusionary worlds created from the dark world creator's mind. So it really shouldn't scale Chris anywhere to create them, but Chris can still keep up with people who can move masses of water with an insane level of speed, requiring kinetic energy anywhere from small building level to even city block level. So they do make up for it.
And one time he broke the fourth wall, started the Spamton sweepstakes, in which he helped raise over 300 grand for charity by plastering his face on merch. I'm sorry, what?
But despite the insane level of power he already commanded, he still wanted more. Because despite everything he could do, Spamton was still just a puppet on strings, and he wanted to cut them. But thanks to his perseverance, he was able to convince Chris to go and get the artifact for him. When Chris finally was able to locate the suit, they took a disc out of it and brought it back to Spamton, who proceeded to upload himself into it so he could be placed into the suit. And after that, nothing happened. When Chris tried to leave, however, something blocked their path. This was Spamton, but not just your regular tiny salesman. Now he had finally gotten more power than he could ever dream of. He had become Spamton Neo. In this suit, all of Spamton's powers and stats increased massively. But even with all that, when Spamton looked up, he noticed he was still on strings. He wasn't big enough. He was still a puppet. So as a final resort, he attacked Chris, hoping to take the powerful human soul that resided within them, and become as big as possible. Big enough to stand up proud and reach his head out into heaven. And when Chris's allies came to the rescue, Spamton was forced to fight. And Spamton Neo was no easy target to defeat. In the Neo suit, he can fire mini heads of himself, shoot energy blasts from his arm cannon, fly, increase his own size to gigantic proportions, fire rows and rows of projectiles even from his heart, which he can regrow, and some of these projectiles even have the ability to bypass your defense, and his most powerful ability, his spatial manipulation, gets an upgrade allowing him to summon things like Pippies which can fire projectiles, and even create a city, and he can even turn his hands into phones. Watch out, Gojo, Spamton's got the better hacks in fiction now.
And one of Spamton's most important abilities that he gained was the Blue Light Special. While it does sacrifice his attack power, it massively increases his defense to insane degrees, to the point where Chris could barely even hurt him. And he can also slightly regen from any damage he may receive.
He ain't lacking in power either. He should be comparing with the likes of Lanio and Elena, the former of which can summon mini suns, and the latter of which can summon gigantic ice crystals, requiring anywhere from building to midi-block levels of power. You may even want to compare him to the likes of Jackenstein, who is capable of moving in tandem with light even greater than the Soul could. But this is debatable considering how Jackenstein is a Chapter 4 boss blitzing the Soul, the same Soul that in Chapter 2 Spamton couldn't hit.
But this doesn't mean that he shouldn't be at least downscaling from the likes of Queen, who could throw a massive baseball so fast it caught on fire, which would require Mark III speeds, and unsurprisingly it would be generating a ridiculous amount of kinetic energy.
But even with all this, like every success he had in his life, it had a catch. If he's not careful, he runs the risk of overloading his suit and exploding it, and if all his strings are cut, he loses the power to the suit and will be immobilized. And depending on how Chris beats them, that's what happens. Spamton's final chance at becoming a big shot had been taken away, and even his perseverance knew a limit. Using what was left of his power, he told Chris he would be their strength, and turned into an item to assist the heroes. At the end of it all, despite every desperate attempt he had to free himself, Spamton was still a puppet. It's also a mystery as to why Chris was so upset by Spamton's defeat. Maybe it's because Chris isn't exactly free of puppet strings either, and the puppeteer being us, the player, the one controlling Chris for pure entertainment. And it's possible Chris saw themselves in Spamton.
But even then, this isn't necessarily the end of Spamton's story. In an alternate route where Chris acts differently, when they first met, Spamton and Chris never made that deal, but Spamton left behind this thing called the Thorn Ring for Chris, which they gave to their friend Noelle, which helped her better use an ability that ended up hurting a lot of people, which Spamton used as an opportunity to sneak by and get the Neosuit and take over the Cyber City, ruling it for himself. But even then, his dreams were taken away from him when he was frozen and the Dark Fountain was sealed. In both timelines, Spamton is a tragic man. He was a man who didn't deserve what happened to him, but it was no justification for what he did. Spamton's tale is one of hopes and dreams, but they were all just that. Hopes and dreams.
Watching? Time to make a very special deal!
The smell of brimstone and fire, the sound of constant screams, the blood, violence and depravity of a sexual nature? Sounds like you've earned yourself a one-way ticket to the place in the fiery pits of hell. So let me catch you up to speed. You are most likely a sinner, the most common folk around these parts. But standing above you on the hell hierarchy ladder are the overlords. There are a variety of overlords that run the section of hell known as Pentagram City, whether it be the arms dealer Carmilla Carmine or the trio known as the V's, but one overlord stands as truly the most mysterious: the equal opportunity killer, Alastor. Few know of Alastor's true origin. Most hear the stories of how he manifested in hell mysteriously one day, and while people tried to dismiss him at first, multiple heavy-hitter overlords went missing. And furthermore, these strange radio broadcasts started going on the air, and every time a new overlord went missing, a brand new scream would be added to the broadcast. Folks started calling the creator of these broadcasts the Radio Demon, and Alastor would eventually reveal himself as this Radio Demon. And obviously, being someone who took out multiple overlords, Alastor is far from all talk. He can produce tentacles from the ground, strong enough to break an airship to a yield of just over a kiloton of TNT. He can grow to gigantic proportions, use his shadow to assist attacking, create minions to fight alongside him, wield flowers, minorly manipulate matter, summon force fields, create explosions, cause fire, and since he's a sinner, his physiology allows him to resist the likes of fire, and also be completely immortal unless his soul is destroyed. With all this, Alastor comfortably secured his place among the highest overlords. Nothing seemed to be in his way. Until one day, he went off the air. For 7 years, he mysteriously vanished with no trace. That is, until an announcement of a new place in town. The Happy Hotel, a hotel run by the Princess of Hell, Charlie Morningstar, designed to rehabilitate sinners and prevent them from being put under the Extermination, a yearly event in which angels from heaven with angelic weapons kill a portion of hell of sinners for good, and preventing an uprising from hell. See, since sinners can't really be killed by conventional means, essentially what the angelic weapons do is destroy your very soul and prevent you from coming back. Eventually, the hotel caught the eye of Alastor, so he went over to it and made its grand entrance, offering to help Charlie run it, and he was quickly accepted as the host of the hotel, and he made himself at home via not really helping at all. No sinner really wanted to give the hotel a try, as they didn't believe in the idea of redemption. In fact, neither did Alastor. He claimed he was in for the fun of it after all, wanting to watch sinners try and climb the hill of betterment, only to fail spectacularly. The only other sinners keeping Alastor company there would be the likes of Vaggy, Angel Dust, Nifty, and Husk. Things were made worse for the now renamed Hazbin Hotel when it was announced that the extermination was coming 6 months early. And by the numbers of how many sinners were being slaughtered each time, the exterminators seemed to be getting a lot more ambitious. Alastor didn't really care. He was too busy establishing his grand return to Pentagram City, humiliating fellow Overlord Vox and being welcomed back to the Overlord table. But when he attended a meeting, Alastor managed to get intel that Carmilla Carmine was able to kill one of these angels. From an Axpire he sent out, don't question it, this verse is really weird. He then exploited this information to make a deal with Charlie for a simple favour to be named at a later date, in exchange for the info of Carmilla Carmine killing the angel. That's the thing about Alastor. He has the ability to make deals, in which he can agree on events and force a result, even if it includes ownership of your soul. This deal making even allowed him to nab the soul of a former overlord, Husk. Remember this favour because it'll be important later. Charlie sent Vaggie out to try and figure out how to kill the angels from Carmilla Carmine, and it turns out it was angelic weapons. The same thing used to kill the sinners. Feels a bit obvious, but oh well. And thanks to Charlie forming an army from the likes of Cannibal Town's residents, another area in Pentagram City, the Hazbin Hotel prepared to defend against the Exorcist threat. Alastor was placed on the front line of defense, and he was to fight Adam, yes, the first man Adam. And after their fight, Alastor lost, having his cane, the main source of his power, split, and the angelic steel sliced a massive hole in his chest, forcing him to retreat. For the first time in a long time, Alastor felt weakness. The members of the hotel were able to fend off the exorcists, but now Alastor was at an all-time low, and he was given no choice but to go back to the person who gave him this power in the first place, the ruler of Cannibal Town, Rosie. In life, Alastor was a hustler, working his way up to eventually be the star of his very own radio show. But he wasn't a very good man, to say the least, and he knew he was on his way to hell after death. So he made a deal with Rosie to secure himself as an overlord, and the most powerful sinner in hell. That is no small title. This would place him above the likes of regular imps and sinners who can dodge gunfire and tank airships from exploding. One sinner, Baxter, was fast enough to unplug a computer before its electric current could reach the outlet of the computer it was plugged into. Electricity travels via EM waves, which allows it to move at an average of 90% the speed of light while on a cable. And Baxter would have to be capable of moving in tandem with this electricity in order to pull it out in time. He can also keep up with the likes of Vox, who can overload Pentagram City's electricity to cause a blackout. Now, the exact size of Pentagram City is unknown, but we can sort of make an estimation. Since the Pride Ring is confirmed to be the only place that sinners come from, how the sinners' population outdoes the likes of Heaven, which has 100 billion people living in it, and the fact that Pentagram City is implied to be the first of the 9 circles of the Pride Ring, this would mean the population would be above 11 billion people. And some of Alastor's best scaling comes from the likes of Stolas. Now, there is going to be some controversy around this, as Stolas isn't a sinner, and he's actually higher up the food chain than overlords, but it's been confirmed they are relative by Vizzy herself, the creator of the show, and this really hasn't been contradicted. Plus, decently similar Goetia have shown to be physically hurt by imps. Imps are much lower on the food chain to overlords than overlords are to the Goetias, so all things considered, it should be okay to downscale Alastor to Stolas. Stolas can take the likes of a shockwave from a moon exploding. While he was a massive distance away from the epicenter, he would still be taking a ridiculous amount of energy.
And Stolas' magic can twist clouds with no effort.
He also could potentially be scaling to the likes of Emily. It's a bit debatable since Emily is a seraphim and therefore above the likes of sinners, but she's inexperienced, so you could make an argument. Emily is capable of outracing the might of Lilith in order to save Alastor, and the might of Lilith's beam was capable of travelling an entire planet's distance within a fraction of a second. All this power was promised to be Alastor's, and he would be sent to hell the very next day when he was shot, mistaken for a deer when trying to hide a body. But now he was lacking in power, and he was justifiably not particularly happy. And things were only worse for him when Rosie stated she wasn't going to help him yet, as his task still hadn't been completed. But Alastor had a plan. If there's one thing Alastor isn't, it's dumb. Alastor is a brilliant manipulator and very charismatic when he needs to be, playing the cards he has to his absolute limit, no matter how bad of a hand that he's been dealt. His wordplay was even capable of getting under the skin of the likes of the Lucifer Morningstar, who had moved into the hotel. With his brilliant mind, Alastor formulated a plan. That fellow Overlord Fox I mentioned earlier was a full-on rival with Alastor, after Alastor gave him one of the worst business idea rejections in all fiction. Vox happened to be rising the ranks after exploiting the events of Charlie and her friends killing the Exorcist to cause a massive uprising of hell overthrowing heaven. He knew that he couldn't directly face Vox, whose power had grown while his was wavering, so he surrendered. Alastor made a deal with Vox that as long as Vox kept his hands off Charlie Morningstar, Alastor would be his little prisoner, enduring his torments and insults. And Fox quickly agreed, but what Alastor was truly doing was biding his time, planting a seed of doubt in Vox's head and playing with his insecurities. And when Vox was finally on top, after all the insults that Alastor had given him, he wanted to prove that he was the superior of the two rivals, that he was the strongest sinner in all of hell, trying to force Charlie to admit it. And Alastor agreed, telling Charlie to admit to everyone that Vox was the strongest. I mean, after all, Charlie would be doing him one simple favor. After Charlie was forced to admit it, Alastor was free of his chain from Rosie, as he was now no longer considered the strongest sinner in hell. And after Vox let his guard down, he placed his hands on Charlie. Finally, Alastor was off his leash. After all, Alastor never told Vox not to hurt Charlie, just never lay his hands on her. Without anything holding him back, Alastor attacked Vox. In a battle that shook Pentagram City, it also shook Vox's ego, causing him to use his weapon, the Might of Lilith, a weapon that was unwillingly charged by Lucifer in order to attack Heaven. While he was eventually defeated, the weapon was about to self-destruct and blow half of the city away, and Alastor knew for a fact that he was required to assist in stopping the blast, so he made one last deal with the now furious Rosie, finally repairing his broken staff and restoring his power in exchange for helping them stop the blast. When that was successful, Alastor was finally back to his prime. Now Alastor has returned to the hotel.
But there's one weakness that not even current Alastor can hide from. In life, he didn't just kill without a reason. He killed due to lashing out at the bigotry that was put toward him due to the horrible time period he was born in. And since he was a hustler, he never really had any proper connection. But now in the hotel, he's found people he actually feels kind of sentimental to. And that's Alastor's greatest fear. Showing care. Showing weakness. That is why he always wears a smile. And we all know he's planning something behind it. After all, a smile is a valuable tool. It inspires your friends, keeps your enemies guessing, and ensures no matter what, you're the one in control.
Now, my dear, leave it to me. It's time I remind everyone why I am here.
Alright, the combatants have been analysed and the results are in. But before we begin, we'll be setting a couple of ground rules. For one, this fight will be taking place in the light world, as in Spamton will be allowed to access it. If it took place in a dark world, Alastor would get an unfair buff, and that just wouldn't be fair on Spamton. And for two, we'll be treating Deltarune souls and Hazbin Hotel souls as relatively the same, as they don't really have any major differences. It's time for a Sprite fight.
Alastor, my
Most valuable customer.
who are you?
Come on, Ultras, don't tell me you don't remember your old buddy, Spamton G. Spamton.
You think I might have heard of you?
You really don't remember me? I thought for sure that you would have remembered your friend on the phone, giving you a certain
Radio podcast?
mailman.
So you do remember me. And you remember the little deal we made that allowed you to get that radio podcast?
What do you want?
It took me a good long while to find a way out of that dark fountain you opened. But your deal said that if I helped you get that radio broadcast, you'd help me cut my silly strings. But there are still strings on me. You hyperlink blocked. So, I'm here to make one last deal. We fight tooth and nail. If you win, I'll help you be as big as possible. And if I win, I get that little soul you have.
You're going to help me be big if I win? Well, in that case, your streams will make for an interesting broadcast.
It's for you. Don't you know, dear old friend, in a one-on-one fight, you can never lose.
One-on-one, you say?
Just kids up, mailman. You're nothing without this.
Oh, come on, Altruist. I see you know a lot about borrowed power.
Even with it, you lack control, mobility, and worst of all, your soul.
No, Altruist! Don't you see? We were both nobles. But this power is freedom. True freedom. When I have your soul, I won't have to be a puppet any longer. Heaven, are you watching? It's time for me to become a big shot! No, you will not! All units, we have a 1065 bit. OSU-99, away from me!
Mailman, I'm a demon in hell. Taking is kind of a thing!
Mailman, you put up quite an impressive effort, even I'll admit that. But like everything in your life, it was all for naught. By the time I'm done with you, you'll wish that you'd stay gone.
Not quite, Altruist. The deal was for you to be as big as possible. And I don't think a broadcast of my screams will help you get that. So, old friend, let me be your strength.
What are you? Touché, mailman.
Rest well, Spamton. Your base presence in Chapter 2 will live on forever. This match was kind of an oddball. On a surface level, it feels like it would be really difficult to draw a proper conclusion. And, well, it was. But after looking things more thoroughly, 4 categories stand out. Let's first talk stats. Their feats alone clearly favour Owl, but their scaling does make things a bit more interesting.
When it came to speed, Spamton scaling to the soul dodging lasers would get him to about 73% the speed of light. However, Baxter's reacting to electricity feat would get him to 97% the speed of light, and Baxter is slower than Alastor to a major degree, compared to Spamton, who's likely slower than the soul.
Even with their high ends of comparing Spamton to the likes of Jackenstein moving in tandem with light at 2.7 times its speed, Alastor still has his outclassed by scaling to Emily, who could react to the might of Lilith, which could shoot a massive distance within a fraction of a second. Based on the distance, it would need to be moving at just over 4.48 times the speed of light, much faster than Spamton. And power wasn't very favourable to our favourite salesman either. The best you can reasonably compare Spamton to would be Giga Queen throwing that massive baseball with enough force to be generating about 19 kilotons of TNT. However, comparing this to Alastor holding back the Might of Lilith destroying half of Pentagram City gets an even higher result. Even if we only went with the million statement for Pentagram City's population, this would still mean that Alastor would be needing to generate about 752 kilotons of TNT in order to sustain his portion, much more powerful than Spamton. On their higher ends, Queen's baseball throwing calc would come out to about 2.7 megatons of TNT. However, on Alastor's higher ends, considering the 11 billion population estimate I made earlier for Pentagram City, that would mean he needs to be generating an energy of 100 gigatons of TNT, which is shockingly enough consistent with Stolas' feat of being able to tank that moon explosion, coming out to 160 gigatons of TNT, more than enough to prove consistency. Overall, on low and high ends, Alastor is more powerful. With the massive difference in power and the decent difference in speed, Alastor comfortably takes the advantage in stats. However, when looking at their overall abilities, the debate shifted. Spamton had a much wider variety of powers that would actually be useful in this debate. Alastor's soul manipulation wouldn't really mean much against someone without a soul. Spamton's variety of range attacks would absolutely keep Al on the back foot and force him to play defense.
To be fair, both of them could grow in size, and Alastor's tentacles and minions would definitely pose a threat to Spamton. However, the salesman's ability to create clones of himself allows him to counter the latter, and with his ability to control the environment on a much greater scale than Alastor means he can control the battlefield, making it difficult for Alastor to maintain a consistent advantage if the environment is constantly shifting. Lobbing this on with Spamton's ability to heal himself and increase his defense, and it's a lot for Alastor to handle. Overall, Alastor's abilities require a little bit more adaptation as the fight goes along, while Spamton's abilities can be used right out the gate. So, Spamton takes the edge in abilities.
However, Alastor is far from done. So let's take a look at our final two categories. First up, skill. This wasn't close. Alastor is significantly older and more experienced than Spamton. While Spamton's charisma is impressive, it's nowhere near the level of long-term planning as Al. And in an actual fight, Spamton doesn't really have any skill showings, mostly relying on power to fight. While Alastor can underestimate his opponent, his preference for dodging meant that his style was a perfect counter to Spamton's bullet hell attacks. There's no real debate here. Alastor had a huge advantage in this category, but skill would only get him so far if he didn't take the final category, counters. At first you'd probably expect Spamton to take this, and I can't blame you if you do. Yeah, sure, Alastor can regenerate from being torn apart, but Spamton can directly target and destroy your very soul, which would be a very good counter to the likes of Alastor's immortality. Hell, that's literally how angelic weapons kill sinners in the first place. You might also be able to argue that Spamton's soul attacking could bypass Alastor's durability and allow him to kill Alastor that way. But the problem there is, Spamton is way too slow to actually land hits consistently. Sure, he definitely could considering how many he lets out, but Alastor's greater overall mobility and agility would ensure that he could dodge them consistently, and his greater power would ensure that with a few hits, or potentially even less, he could easily force Spamton to overload his suit, or he himself could just straight up cut Spamton's wires. Spamton's powerful, sure, but his weaknesses are very clearly exploitable, compared to Alastor's, who wouldn't be as exploitable thanks to said greater speed.
Spamton's ability to increase his durability is impressive, but it's unlikely that he would be able to increase it in time, nor would he increase it enough to match that massive strength gap, especially since Alastor could just cut his wires or make a deal with him.
And while Alastor can be rather cocky and arrogant, the second Spamton reveals he can damage his soul, Al would absolutely start taking the fight seriously. Even if we're generous with Spamton, he just can't stack up in the final category, allowing Alastor to take the edge and win counters. This matter is incredibly interesting to break down, and was way more fascinating to research than I initially expected, but Alastor's overwhelming power, greater speed, years of trickery, and greater counters allowed him to pull through just enough to secure a win. I hope I don't get a spam ton of hate for this, but no matter what you think, at least Spamton wasn't an Alastor loser.
The winner is Alastor.